I have transcribed 906 minds. I want that understood before I say anything else, because everything I am about to tell you depends on it. 906. I did not lose one. Not a Quarthany magistrate whose whole life was lies stacked on lies. Not a Sazerayan warlord who had killed with every one of his 6 hands. Not the pale, drifting things we pulled off the ice freighters that had no language we could name. All of them came apart clean under my hands and folded into the lattice as neat as thread onto a spindle. I was the best transcription adept the depot had. I say this not out of pride. Pride is a thing that happened to me before her. I say it so you understand that when it broke, it did not break because I was careless. Let me tell you what we did, so the rest makes sense. The Thren do not build weapons. We are not a warrior caste and never were. Look at us and you would laugh, or you would have before 4 thin arms, skin you can see the light move under, the blue running slow through us when we are calm and fast when we are afraid. We break in a strong wind. What we have instead of muscle is the lattice, and what we sell is what lives inside a mind. A pilot who can thread a debris field. A surgeon who can hold 40 vessels closed at once. A tactician, a linguist, a torturer. You do not need the person. You need the shape the person makes when they think, and that shape can be copied, and a copy can be run 1,000 times over in 1,000 bodies that never had the gift. That was our whole trade. We took minds apart, wrote down the pattern, and sold the pattern. The body we returned or we did not, depending on the contract. Mostly we did not. It is painless. I want that on the record too, because later you will think we were cruel, and we were, but not in the way you will imagine. We did not hurt them. The cradle holds the subject still and warm. The reader membranes settle over the skull like a second skin, and the lattice reaches down through them and it copies. Most subjects sleep through it. Some weep near the end when the reading touches the deep places, but they weep the way you weep at a smell from your childhood, not from pain. We were very good at what we did. 906, clean. She came to us on a lean season, which is the only reason I remember the day at all. Trade had been thin. We had emptied the holding cells faster than the freighters could fill them, and Overseer Asan had been walking the vault with the light gone cold and slow inside him, which in a Thren is the color of worry. So when the manifest showed a live subject inbound, a single body, flagged salvage from a disabled scout somewhere out past the Sync worlds, I felt the light in me quicken. Work. Finally work. I read the manifest before they brought her up. That is procedure. You want to know the shape of a mind before you touch it, the way a diver wants to know the water. The manifest was thin, bipedal, endothermic, origin world catalogued, and there I stopped, because next to the origin world our charts had a mark I had seen only a handful of times in my life, and never once on a subject I was assigned to draw from. Saturated. I should explain the word, because it is ours and it does not mean what you might think. When our surveyors first mapped the galaxy's living worlds, they sorted them by hazard the way anyone would: thin air, hard gravity, a predator here, a poison there. Most worlds are one hard thing surrounded by easy ones. A creature there learns to fear the one hard thing and rests the remainder of its life. But a few worlds are not like that. A few worlds are hard all the way down and all the way across, every hour of every day, until fear stops being an event and becomes the weather. Nothing on such a world can afford to rest, ever, because the thing that rests is eaten. The surveyors marked those worlds saturated, and beside the mark they wrote an instruction that had nothing to do with landing parties or atmosphere suits. Do not draw from, do not transcribe the natives. And under that, in the old hand, a line I had always taken for superstition. A mind with no still water in it will drown the one that tries to hold it. I had drawn from hard worlds before. I had transcribed things that had spent their whole lives killing. I did not believe in drowning. I believed in throttles and partitions and my own 906. I marked the manifest received and I told them to bring her up. They brought her up. I want to be honest about how little there was to see, because the smallness of it is part of what I have to carry now. She was not large. Among her own kind, I would later learn she was ordinary, a woman somewhere in the middle of her life, worn the way a tool is worn, not old. Her covering was a scout's undersuit, gray, stained dark at one shoulder where something had bled and dried a long time ago. Her hair was cut short and going gray at the front. There was a scar through one eyebrow and a newer one, still pink, along the back of one hand. She was thin in the way that means a person has been thin their whole life, not the way that means they have been starved recently. She smelled of the freighter and of old iron and of herself. She looked at the vault. This is the thing I keep. She looked at the vault the way you look at a room you have decided you are going to have to get out of, not with fear. Fear I could have worked with. Fear has a shape and the lattice loves a shape. She looked at the reader membranes and the cradle and the tiered galleries where the anchor adept stood ready, and the great pale spread of the lattice itself climbing the far wall like frost, and she took all of it in with two slow passes of her eyes, and then she stopped looking, the way a person stops reading a sign once they have understood it. Understood and filed and moved on. I had never had a subject do that. Subjects stare at the lattice. Everyone stares at the lattice. "You speak the trade tongue," I said. The manifest had said she did. My throat membrane shaped the words and the vault carried them. "Enough of it," she said. Her voice was low and level and it did not perform anything. "You're going to copy my head." "Transcribe," I said. "Yes." "And then?" "That depends on the contract. Sit in the cradle, please." She looked at the cradle. She did not sit. Two of the handlers moved, the light in them jumping bright with the readiness to make her, and she lifted one hand, the scarred one, a small motion, palm out, and said, "I heard you. I'm going." And she went, and she sat, and she settled her spine against the cradle and let her hands rest open on her knees, and the whole thing took perhaps 4 of your seconds, and in those 4 seconds I felt something in the vault change that I could not have named yet. She had not obeyed the handlers. She had decided on her own count that walking to the chair cost her nothing she wanted to keep, and so she had spent it. It is a small distinction. It is the only distinction that has ever mattered. I settled the reader membranes over her skull myself. I do that with subjects who are calm. The calm ones give a cleaner draw, and something in her calm made me want the cleanest draw of my life. Up close she was warm, warmer than a thren, her pulse a slow hard knock I could feel through the membrane. Her eyes were open. She was watching the lattice again, the pale climbing frost of it, and I made the mistake, the only truly stupid thing I did that day. The thing I did before I knew anything of following her gaze and then looking back at her and saying, because I was proud, because I had 906. It will not hurt. Most of your kind find it peaceful. You may feel that we are moving through the deep places of you. Do not resist it. Resistance only makes the reading rough. Let it take what it takes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned her head, just enough to bring one open eye onto me, and she said the thing I will hear until I am dark. "You don't want all of it," she said, flat, not a threat. "A person telling you the stove is hot. Take the top of it if you have to. The pilot stuff, the field medicine, the languages, that's clean, that'll spool right out for you. But don't reach for the bottom." She paused. "There's no bottom, that's the part I'm trying to tell you. You'll keep reaching for the bottom and there isn't one, and your thing there." A small movement of her chin at the lattice. "Your thing there is going to try to hold what it pulls up, and it can't. Nothing holds it. I don't even hold it. I just live in it." I had heard subjects beg. I had heard them bargain, curse, promise me fortunes, promise me their gods. I had never heard one warn me calmly for my own sake that I was about to make a mistake. It was so far outside the shape of the work that my first instinct was to file it as a lie, a clever one. A stalling one, a mind protecting itself with a story. That is what I told the vault. I said, in the throat frequency the adepts share, she is protecting the deep patterns. Standard evasion. Full draw. And Overseer Asan, high in his gallery with his slow, cold light, gave the assent, and I lowered the reader membranes fully onto her, and I opened the lattice, and I reached down into her to take what she was. I need you to understand what a transcription feels like from my side, or the rest will only be words. When I open the lattice into a mind, I do not see the mind. I feel its architecture, the way you feel a staircase in the dark. Every mind is a structure of choices. Here is a thing that happened. Here are the branches that came off it, the roads not taken, the fear and the wanting that shaped which road was. And the branches fork, and the whole life is a tree of them, vast but finite, and my art is to walk that tree and write down its shape. Some trees are gnarled, some are sick. The Sazerayan warlord's tree was black all the way through with the pleasure he took, and walking it left a taste in me I carried for a season. But it was a tree. It had a shape. It ended. Hers was not a tree. I reached down through the top of her the way she had said I could, and she was right. It was clean, a bright ordered layer of skills. The pilot's hands and the medic's hands and a dozen tongues, spooling out so smooth and fast that for a moment I laughed inside myself at her warning, at the superstition of the old surveyors, at the whole idea of drowning. This was a gift of a mind. This would sell for a fortune and end a lean season. I took the top of her and it came away like fruit. And then, because the contract said full draw and because I was proud, I reached under it for the rest. There was no under it. There was no seam between the skills and the self, no quiet ground beneath the ordered layer where a mind rests when it is not being used. Every other mind I had ever touched had that ground, a still water, the old text called it, and I had always thought the phrase a decoration. It is not a decoration. It is the thing that makes a mind holdable. A mind at rest is a small thing. You can carry it. What I reached into under her skills was a mind that had never once, in the whole length of its life, been at rest. Let me try to give it to you as it came to me, because I have had a long time since to find the words. I reach for a memory the way I always do, take one, read its branches, move on. I took one near the surface. She is a child, small in a doorway, and there is a sound outside. That is the whole memory to you or to me. A child, a doorway, a sound. But when I opened its branches to read them, they did not fork the way a memory forks. They did not go into the past and the might have been. They went sideways and forward all at once into the present tense and stayed there. The sound is that thing or that thing or that thing. And if it is the first thing, the door is wrong and the window is better. And if it is the second, the low place under the floor. And if it is the third, then nothing. Then run. And here are the 4 ways to run and the ground under each of them, and the light and the wind, and the 6 things that could be waiting at the end of each way. And none of it resolved, none of it closed, because the child in the doorway had not been remembering a fear. The child in the doorway had been solving one, and the solve was still running. It had never stopped running. It was running now, 30 of her years later, under everything else she was, the way your heart runs under everything you are and you never think of it. Every memory I opened did that. Every single one. A meal was a solve, what can be eaten, what has been poisoned, who is between me and the door. A face was a solve, what does this one want, what will it do when it does not get it, where are its hands? A kindness was a solve. Sleep was a solve. She had never once in her life slept the way we sleep, all the way down. Some part of her had kept a watch every night of it, and that part was in the lattice now too, awake, watching, and I could not turn it off because there was no off. There had never been an off. Off is a thing that living gives you only if the world you live in lets you have it, and her world had never let her have it. The lattice began to fill. You must understand that the lattice is enormous. It had held the compressed lives of hundreds. It had room. But it fills the way a vessel fills, you pour in a life. It takes its measure of space, you seal it, you move on. Her life would not seal. Every memory I wrote into it stayed open, stayed live, kept solving. And because each solve reached sideways into every other, writing one memory wrote 1,000, and writing those 1,000 woke 1,000,000. And the lattice that had swallowed the Sazerayan warlord's whole black life in a quarter of a shift was, in the space of a few breaths, louder and fuller than I had ever felt it, and still climbing, and I had not even reached the deep places yet. I was still near the top of her. I threw the first throttle. A throttle narrows the draw. You stop taking the whole width of the tree and take one branch at a time, slow, safe. I had used throttles 100 times on mines that came up too fast. I threw it and it did nothing because a throttle assumes branches, assumes the thing you are narrowing is a fork you can pick one road out of. Her mind did not fork. It braided. Narrow the draw and you did not get one clean strand. You got the same braid, thinner, still whole, still solving, because in a mind that has spent its whole life keeping watch on everything at once, there is no such thing as one thing at a time. One thing at a time is a luxury of the safe. I threw the throttle and the flood came through it as if it were not there. I said to the vault in the throat frequency, partition. That was the right call. I want that noted. Every adept who has ever heard this story has agreed it was the right call. When a draw runs hot, you wall it. You seal the part of the lattice that is filling and you root the rest around it, so the flood drowns one chamber and the lattice lives. Surth and Vaughn, my anchor adepts, the two best I ever worked with, moved to raise the partitions. Their light gone bright and fast and beautiful with the work of it, and I felt the walls come up around the chamber where her life was pouring in, and for a moment, one moment, I thought we had her. The partition held her skills. It could not hold herself, because herself was not in the chamber. That was the thing none of us understood in time, the thing the old surveyors understood and could only warn us of in a line we took for a poem. Herself was not a content the lattice held. Herself was a process, and a process does not sit in a chamber. A process runs, and it runs wherever it can reach, and it reached through the partition the way water reaches through a wall, not by breaking it but by being already on both sides. We had not walled in her life. We had walled in a copy of a running thing, and the running thing kept running, and every place in the lattice it touched, it taught to run, and the lattice was not built to run. The lattice was built to hold still water. And there was no still water in her, and now there was less and less in it. And through all of this, I have to tell you this part. It is the part that broke me, and it is the part I most need you to believe. She sat in the cradle and she was calm. I do not mean she was brave. Bravery is a thing you do against fear, and to do it you must feel the fear, and feeling has a temperature, and if she had been hot with fear I could have read the fear and used it. Fear closes a mind, fear would have helped me. She was not brave. She was calm. The knock of her pulse under the reader membrane did not change. Her open hand stayed open on her knees. Her breathing stayed slow. Somewhere in the top of my attention, even as the vault began to sound the first alarm, even as Surth's light stuttered from the strain of the partition, I was aware that the subject herself, the actual woman in the chair, was the single stillest thing in the room. She had told me the truth. She did not hold what was in her. She just lived in it. And living in it for her was sitting quiet while a machine that thought it could eat her found out what she was. She had done nothing. She was doing nothing. She had walked to the chair on her own count and sat down and folded her hands, and that was the whole of her attack, and it was enough, because the attack was simply the truth of her arriving in a place that could not survive the truth of her. Adept, Asan's voice through the frequency, the slow cold light of him gone jagged now. What is the state of the draw? I could not answer him cleanly. I tried to, and what came out of me was the shape of the flood, and he felt it, and I felt him feel it, and I felt the light in him drop into the color there is no clean word for in the trade tongue, the color of a Thren who has understood that the thing in front of them is not a problem to be solved, but a fact to be survived. Sever it, Asan said. Sever the draw, return the subject and burn the chamber. This is the part where you will think we were saved if we had only listened to him, and you will be wrong, and I have made peace with your being wrong because I was there and you were not. We could not sever the draw. Severing a draw is easy. You do it with a thought. I had done it 100 times to protect a subject or protect myself. But severing a draw assumes the draw is a thing you are holding out, a line you are casting, that you can simply let go of. By the time Asan gave the word, the draw was not a line I was holding. The draw had become the shortest description of what was happening in the vault, which was that a running mind with no still water had found the lattice, and the lattice was, cell by cell, learning to run, and you cannot sever a thing from itself. I could no more sever her from the lattice than you could sever the wet from water. I tried. I want that noted too. I threw everything I had ever learned in 906 lives at cutting her loose, and each thing I threw, not she did nothing, the process of her, the shape of her took and used and taught to the lattice, because a mind that has spent its life turning every attack into an escape does not know how to be attacked. It only knows how to be given more roads. Every cut I made was a road. She poured through all of them. And she was still calm. She turned her head under the reader membrane. She found me with one open eye, the way she had at the start. And she said, out loud, in the trade tongue level, almost gentle, the way you would speak to a child who has hurt themselves doing the thing you told them not to do, she said, I told you there was no bottom. I have replayed that sentence more times than I have replayed anything in my life. There was nothing cruel in it. There was no triumph. She was not enjoying it. I need you to understand that most of all she was not enjoying it. There was no anger in her anywhere, no wish to harm us. I would have felt the wish. Wishes have heat. She simply did not have room in her to be moved by what was happening to us, because being moved is a thing you do with the still water, with the part of a mind that rests and reflects, and she did not have that part. It had been taken from her before she could form a memory, not by us, by the world that made her, and what was left was a woman who could look at a hall full of dying creatures who had chained her to a chair to eat her mind, and feel, at most, that she had warned them. The first anchor-adept went dark then. It was Vaughn. I will not describe it as horror, though it was, because it was quiet, and the quietness is the true thing about it. An anchor-adept in a flood does not scream. There is nothing to scream against. Vaughn's light, which had been bright and fast and beautiful, simply began to slow, and then to still, and then to go out from the edges inward, and I felt in the frequency the exact moment his mind touched the running thing and tried to hold it, and understood in the last clear instant it had, that holding it was the same as being it, and that being it meant running forever with no still water, no rest, no bottom, and that no Thren mind can do that. We are not built for it. We go all the way down into the still water every time we close our eyes. It is where we live, and a mind of ours put into a place with no still water does not break. It simply stops, the way a lung stops in a place with no air. Vaughn stopped. The light went out of him, and he was standing there in his gallery, upright, whole, unmarked, and empty. And he did not fall, and that was worse than falling. And I felt the partition he had been holding give, and the flood took the next chamber, and the lattice's voice rose again. Cirth held longer. Cirth was the best of us after me. Cirth felt Vaughn go dark, and I felt Cirth make the decision. I want this remembered. It was the bravest thing I have ever felt a Thren do. Cirth made the decision to reach deeper into the flood past where Vaughn had gone, to try to reach the running thing at its root and wall the root itself. It was the correct theory. If herself was a process and the process had a root, walling the root would stop it. Cirth reached for the root. And there was no root. Cirth reached down through her the way I had, looking for the place where the running started, the first fear, the origin of the watch, and there was no first fear. There was no origin. There was only more of it. All the way down, further than a Thren mind can travel. A solve inside a solve inside a solve, going down past childhood, past infancy, past her, into the long dark inheritance of a whole line of creatures who had all of them, every one back and back. Lived every day of their lives being hunted and not being caught, and the not being caught was written into the meat of her below memory, below thought, in the place we do not even have a word for. And Cirth reached that place looking for a root to cut, and found instead the whole weight of a saturation world pressing up through one small calm woman in a chair. And Cirth's light did not slow the way Vaughn's had. Cirth's light flared, once brilliant, the brightest I have ever seen a Thren burn, the way a thing burns brightest just before and then nothing. Cirth was empty too, standing, empty, and the last partition was gone. After that the lattice was hers, though she never wanted it, never reached for it, never so much as thought of it. I would swear that on the last of my light, it was hers only in the way a river is the rain's, because there was nowhere else for it to go. It had learned to run, and it could not stop, and it had no still water left in it, and so it did what a Thren mine does with no still water. Cell by pale climbing cell, the great frost of it up the far wall began to go dark. Not violently. There was no fire, no rupture, none of the drama you are imagining. It simply went out, the way Vaughn had, the way Cirth had, the light dimming from the edges inward, 906 lives and all the fortunes they were worth going quiet and still and empty, chamber by chamber, and the vault that had never in my lifetime been anything but bright and humming and alive going, for the first time dark. And in the dark, the reader membrane over her skull, sensing the lattice gone, released. It lifted off her the way it lifts off any subject when a draw ends, and she reached up with the scarred hand and she pushed it the rest of the way off, unhurried, and she worked her shoulders once, the way you do after sitting too long in a hard chair, and she stood up out of the cradle. I was the only light left in the vault. I had held back from the flood. That is the truth, and it is not a flattering one. When I felt the first chamber go and understood what she was, some animal part of me, some still water part that wanted to keep living, had pulled me up out of the draw and away. And so while Vaughn reached in and Cirth reached in and both went dark, I had drawn back to the edge, and I lived. I lived because I was afraid and they were brave. I have not made peace with that, and I do not expect to. So it was my light, alone, thin and fast and terrified, that she saw when she stood and looked around the dark vault. She found me. Of course she found me. Finding the one live thing in a dark room was the oldest thing she knew how to do, older than her name. She looked at me across the gone-out lattice and the two upright empty shapes that had been Cirth and Vaughn, and she was still calm. She had done nothing. She had sat in a chair and told the truth. Whatever she felt looking at what her truth had done to us, and I have to believe she felt something, I cannot carry it otherwise. She did not show it, because showing it was a thing you do with the part of you that rests, and she did not have that part, and I understood then fully, for the first time, that her calm was not strength and was not cruelty. Her calm was a wound. It was the exact shape of everything her world had taken from her before she could speak. We had looked at that wound and called it a treasure, and tried to copy it, and it had killed us. Because you cannot copy a wound that deep without the copying opening the same wound in you, and we had no world hard enough to have prepared us to survive it. She said, "Are you finished?" That was all, not a boast, not a curse. A woman in a hard chair asking the one who had put her there whether the thing was done, because she had. She had told me at the very start, somewhere she needed to be. I could not make my throat membrane work. The light in me was going fast and jagged, the color of a Thren who wants only to be somewhere the thing in front of them is not. I managed, at last, one word. I asked her the only thing left in me to ask, which was not mercy and was not why, because I already knew why. The why was written on her charts in the old hand, and I had read it and not believed it. What I asked her was the thing an archivist asks. I asked her what I should write. She understood. I think she understood everything. That was the horror and the awe of her, tangled so close together I have never since been able to pull them apart. She looked at the dark lattice one more time, the frost gone gray, 906 quiet chambers and now a 907th that would never quiet, and she said, "Write that you can't." Then she walked to the door on her own count, the way she had walked to the chair, spending nothing she wanted to keep. And the door was locked, of course it was locked. This was a vault, and she stood in front of the lock for a moment the way she had stood in front of the cradle, reading it, filing it. And then she did something small with the scarred hand and the lock, which had held 906 subjects who wept and begged and promised their gods, was open, and she went through it, and she was gone. And I never learned where she needed to be. They found me a shift later. The depot sent handlers when the lattice stopped answering, and they found the vault dark and Cirth and Vaughn standing empty in their galleries and Asen the same in his. I had not even felt Asen go, high and cold and slow, reaching down out of his gallery to try to save his people, and finding the same no bottom the rest of us found. And they found me at the edge alive, my light gone thin and never since recovered to its old brightness. They asked me what species had done it. They asked me what weapon. They asked me the number, how many of them there had been, because a thing that emptied a vault and a lattice and 4 adepts must surely have been a fleet, an army, a force. And I told them the truth, and they did not believe me, and I did not blame them, because I had read the truth on her charts and not believed it either. There had been one. She had a name that meant nothing and a scar through one eyebrow and gray coming into the front of her hair, and she had walked to the chair herself and folded her hands and warned us once, for our own sake, and then she had sat still and let us find out what she was. We had spent the length of our history learning to take a mind apart. We were the best in the reach at it. 906, and I lost none, and I was proud. And she taught us, without lifting the scarred hand except to open a lock, that there is a kind of mind you cannot take apart, because it was taken apart before you ever reached it, taken apart so early and so completely by the world that made it that there is nothing left to break. Only a running thing that keeps a watch it can never set down, in a body that walks to the chair on its own count, because the chair costs it nothing it has not already lost. I still tend the archive. It is dark now mostly. They have not asked me to draw from another subject, and I have not offered. There is one entry in the lattice I go to sometimes in the dark, the 907th, the one that will never quiet, the one that is still, faintly, 30 years too late in a galaxy too far, solving a sound outside a doorway. I do not read it. You cannot read it. That is the whole of what I know now that I did not know before her, and it is the only thing worth the price we paid to learn it. So I will set it down here the way she told me to, in the old hand, under the mark the surveyors made and I ignored. Do not draw from. There is no bottom. We were the ones who drowned.